Hello and welcome. My name is Samuel Ray, also known as the Scuff Doctor, Dr. Sam, and with me is my co-host.
I'm Cy Prime. You can call me Professor Prime. I'm the professional procrastinator, master of madness. Here to yap.
And this is CounterPick New Perspectives, a podcast where we take a variety of different topics in and around the just general entertainment now, and we talk about various topics from a kind of a logical, and we try to bring in more varied takes on these things, whether it be playing devil's advocate or just because we have a different take than what is commonly seen in various internet circles. And this week our topic is something that I thought of because of some stuff I've seen recently. Now, just a heads up, this topic often, when approached by other people, often takes sort of a socio-political bent. We are not going to be doing that here. We are going to approach things from a critical, rational, and logical standpoint on a more merit-based kind of lens, I guess you could say, based on what we've seen just in the fields of, like, I guess from a more creative standpoint, I guess is the way you could look at it here. And so the topic is giving your audience what they want. How much should you do that? And like all the little nuances involved in that, because, you know, usually, like, there's the phrase, right? And you'll see this in the posts on different social medias for this episode that I made, but there's the phrase that is often misquoted. The customer is always right, but it's not just that. It's the customer is always right in matters
when it comes to matters of taste.
And so, Sai, why don't you explain what that means?
It means that the customer decides what they like, what they want to buy, whether or not they like come into the store, right? It doesn't mean they decide how things work in the store. It doesn't mean like, oh, you know, like if they go to like a fast food place and they're like, oh, I want extra cheese on my chili cheese dog, and you give them a chili cheese dog with extra cheese, like, they might want more cheese. That doesn't mean you didn't get extra. It just means it's not extra enough for you, right? So just ask for more. It's not, you know, it's like, oh, can I have some more? It's not, you didn't give me extra cheese. No, this is extra cheese.
Yeah.
You know, like
just like, for example,
you have a preference. Your opinion doesn't mean that they didn't do something right just because you don't like it.
Yeah, and in this case too, like you were saying, the customer doesn't necessarily decide, like, they don't decide everything about the business. Like, the customer can't reshape reality, right? Like, you don't go to a Subway and ask for a McFlurry.
I mean, some people do.
Yeah,
some people are not aware of their surroundings. But,
yeah,
you know,
and those people are stupid, because the reality is you can't get that there. You don't go to an Italian restaurant and ask for an American hamburger.
To be fair, I think the people who will like go to one place and like go to not McDonald's and ask for a McFlurry, they don't really get irate. They're just confused. But the fact is, those people can't reshape reality to get something that is entirely not offered by the company. Yeah. Now, if somebody started crashing out because you told them this is not a McDonald's, I can't get. Do you mean like, I don't know, a Blizzard or a Shake or a you know, like
whatever you do offer?
Yeah. That's a whole nother thing. That doesn't really.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, it's not to that extent, right? The customer taste doesn't dictate all of, like, what you offer per se. So we're already setting a baseline, right? A limit, right? So yes, the customer decides what they like, but they don't exactly get to decide what you offer. Now, that said,
we're not talking about fast food.
Yeah, but in entertainment, it's the same thing, right? Like, you don't go to a shonen show and want shoujo writing, right? You don't go to a show meant for young men and want the young women romance type writing. Like,
true.
Now, generally, just it's a different. They each have their own target audiences, and so let's use that to springboard off of this, right? Because
Okay.
when you ask, do you give the audience, how much do you give the audience what they want? The first question has to be, what audience? What is your audience? And so that brings up the importance of a target audience, right? You have to have an audience
target
in
audience.
mind. Yeah, you have to have an audience in mind. So that, in turn, tells you which audience to listen to when it comes to deciding what they want. Right? So,
yeah.
For example, you don't want to listen to fans of Madden when you're making an RPG, right?
Yeah, it would make sense. Those people don't like RPGs anyway. If it's like, Joe Schmo who tried to play Final Fantasy once and they didn't like it, and they're complaining about, they didn't like it anyway. Even if you change it, they're probably not going to play it again. So I think this is just a ground level, like an atom above ground level statement. But first, you should listen to the audience that pays your bills. I think that's not an unreasonable starting point.
Exactly.
Right?
So now we're narrowing it down even more, right? With these kind of guidelines.
Like if you're trying to make money, okay, right? And
that's what every
let's be
company
real.
needs.
This is a business. Yeah, we're not necessarily talking about, like Timmy on what's that, the various sites where you can just upload your own like amateur games and stuff. Like not just like we're not talking about like Timmy on itch.io that just got into making games and like he's doing his best. Like we're not talking about him, right?
Or an
amateur
amateur
making
film
money off
director
of it,
and
he's doing what he wants, and he's figuring things out.
Or an amateur filmmaker making a movie, a film for what is it, like a film festival, right? Or just to post on YouTube just as a passion project that they're within the free time, right? We're not talking about like, oh, I'm doing this for fun, so I'm going to ignore everyone and make what I want to make, right? Because I'm not relying on this for income. We're not talking about that.
I this is your topic more. You as I usually am, as opposed to like last time, which was actually kind of my topic. But like I'm here to just talk about stuff. But I had one, to like react to what you say and stuff. But I had one thought going into this. Main thought. Basically, like this may sound a little cynical, but like I said, it's a business. There are outliers to be sure, but usually the more personal something is, or like the more that someone makes a game for themselves, it's not going to be for the audience, right? Sometimes, lightning in a bottle happens where the game that someone wanted to make for themselves, like strikes just the right chord. Like this indie game made by one like for instance, like Undertale, right? Toby Fox just being like a super fan of Earthbound, and his vision kind of just happened to resonate with a bunch of people. But like for every Undertale, there's a bunch of indie games made by one or two people team that don't resonate with anybody because they're so specifically personal that it doesn't have mass appeal.
I think in a case like that, it depends on how much of so if you're making something for yourself, I guess it depends on how niche your interests are, right? Or what you like, because if your tastes resonate with, line up with a large audiences, a large, chunk of other people's, and you make it for yourself, then it is going to appeal to more people. But if you are a bit like us, a bit more prone to being different rather than having interests that align with the broader crowd, then if I make something that's just for myself, it's probably not going to appeal to a huge. That's something I actually have had to consider in terms of my own content creation, because something that a lot of advice that you get is, make content you enjoy, because if your heart's not in it, then the audience can tell, right? It ends up being soulless. And that is true. But then to some extent, you do kind of have to take into consideration your target audience, because if you're I've seen so many people on social media bemoaning the fact that, you know, when they do the things that they're truly passionate about, their viewership tanks, or just it gets no engagement. And I get it. I've been there, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
so
I tend to like more niche things rather than the mainstream stuff. So I guess the follow-up to that, the question to ask yourself, if as a creator of any kind of media, is how much do you need this to financially succeed? You know, are you okay with less financial success in order to make something that's more either of a passion project for you, or something that caters to a more niche audience? Or do you need, are you trying to make enough money that you need to appeal to a more broader mainstream audience?
Okay, so let me give you an example, because, like, you know, a lot of people can think of a lot of situations of, like, you know, it's negative. It's like, you know, the people made some kind of media product that, you know, nobody wanted, and a lot of people are angry or whatnot. But I'm going to give an example that isn't necessarily negative. It's just an example of something being, like, very specific, right?
Okay.
I've mentioned this to you once offline, I believe, but the Ultimate Marvel comics, right? They redid the Ultimate Universe. And the 3 comic lines that they started off with was Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Black Panther, and Ultimate X-Men. Ultimate Spider-Man and Black Panther, to my knowledge, were pretty much what you'd expect when you come to Spider-Man and Black Panther.
Relatively
right?
well received.
Well received. With marked differences from the main universe that actually, especially in the case of Ultimate Spider-Man, actually made people enjoy it more than the mainline Spider-Man. But you come to Ultimate X-Men, and it feels a little out of place, because the writer, I forget her name, but she's either a Japanese or Japanese American woman, right? And the aesthetic style is very manga inspired. It doesn't really line up with the other two, right? The storytelling, like, her whole thing, she's inspired by her own experiences growing up as a little girl or a teenager or whatever in Japanese school, and it's kind of a coming of age story, basically,
right? For
and
Armor, right?
From what, the Armor and other, like, new characters, and from what I've heard, people don't necessarily have a negative opinion of it. It's just out of place, and different. It's very specific. It's very specific because it's such a personal story from her, right? Which, newsflash, unfortunately, I don't think most Marvel fans are Japanese and females.
Yeah.
So, well, not
true.
Just teenage girls. You know, it would also apply to, like, adult women who are, you know, remembering, like, what it was like to be. Right. But most X-Men fans are going to be guys, and some of them don't even like manga or anime, so the look is weird to them, and, you know, it's just like,
well, even then, like, most, like even just ignoring, like, you know, the sex of the audience, like, most of X-Men fans are just, for one, going to be probably American, because that's where the X-Men was created, right? Where the comics originated. Yes, it does have a measure of worldwide appeal, but the bulk of the audience is in America.
Yeah, it's
in general, the bulk of the audience isn't even going to be Japanese, right? So
it's not a judgment thing. You just don't relate, right?
Then even if you that's other countries,
and that's not going to be very good for a story that is predicated on being relatable by the person who wrote it, right? If that's the basis of the story, then if you don't relate, you're not going to connect.
Because it doesn't even appeal to the audience in South America or Africa and so on, right? So it's like, it's super specific. So it has a very, very narrow, specific audience, right?
And aside from that, there's also the issue that though the title is Ultimate X-Men, it doesn't really seem like from what little I've seen,
Yeah,
it doesn't really seem like there's X-Men. It's a mutants story.
Yeah.
It's not an X-Men story necessarily.
And historically,
it's not about
though,
superheroes. It's about superhuman kids.
it's a bit more of My Hero Academia than X-Men, right?
Yeah, which honestly, it's a very Japanese style story. Heck, I'd probably enjoy it if I read it. I'm not really a comic reader. I read a few manga, but like Japanese stories, anime, manga stories, right, are more likely to have these like superhuman kid protagonist characters who aren't necessarily heroes, who just have to go through situations that are like thrust upon them, right? That's not really a superhero format, though.
Yeah. And something that I find interesting too, it's because because we know with the X-Men, there's a lot of tangentially, connected characters and teams in the X-Men universe that had their own comic spin-offs.
Yeah,
they were always that
X-Force, Alpha Flight.
Yeah, but the names tell you that they're spin-offs, so they set your expectations. And
now
they're not X-Men.
Yeah, now I don't blame the writer for that.
Yeah.
Because honestly, it was probably just for name recognition, obviously, because more people are going to pay attention if you hear Ultimate X-Men than like
Adventures.
Ultimate Alpha Flight or Ultimate New Mutants or something.
So Star Fox Adventures instead of Dinosaur Planet.
Yeah.
So going back to the main thread that we've been following here, right?
Like something doesn't even necessarily have to be bad to just be made in a way that is not necessarily stand out to the general audience, right? Or the audience that is going to have their eyes on the thing, right?
So that brings us back to that question, right? So what's your target audience, and how much financial kickback do you need from this? How much revenue?
But see, in that case, right, she was writing for something that is like a new version of something that's already established. So it's not necessarily your target audience, but it's the audience that you have in front of you already. Yeah. That's a little bit different because it's like it's literally working for a corporation, right? So yeah, if you aren't if in that situation, right, you are basically kind of handed an opportunity to get your thing out in front of an audience that is already assembled. But in that case, you kind of want to appeal to the audience that you have. Now that's going to be different from someone who is like doing something that is growing from the ground, like I said, with indie games like Undertale, or in the case of independent VTubers, hobbyist VTubers, things like that. YouTubers, streamers, whatever. Like not just VTubers, obviously, but
content creators in general.
Yeah, content creators.
Because like this very podcast, we're not exactly making bank on this. In fact, we haven't even made enough on this to get a single payout, but we do it because we enjoy it.
I like talking sometimes.
Yeah, so we can be a bit more focused and niche with this, right? We can talk about what we want to talk about because we're not trying to make this a career. So that gives us the freedom to do that. And then whoever feels like listening to us will find us, right? Eventually, maybe I could do a little more advertising, but it is what it is. But yeah, so the main questions are like target audience, income need, compared to, time and money spent to make it, whatever it is you're making, and expectations, right? Are you doing something that has an inherent expectation? Because if you do that, and then you go into, I guess we can go into as a related thing, something that tends to ruin, go at odds with the idea of giving the audience what they want, and that's subversion.
Yeah, I was just about to even say too, and what I was going to say kind of connects to it, which is like on the other hand, then something like what I was talking about with Ultimate X-Men, right? There's the negative examples where someone even will like know what the audience wants, but basically says, you know what, you're wrong, you want this, and the audience will just say, no, I don't actually.
Subversion. Malicious subversion is the way I would say it.
Like just not liking your audience. Like what?
Yeah. Because like,
you
and
don't
that's
like
the thing.
your audience, they won't like you. Or if you let them know you don't like them, they won't like you.
Like I've been hearing stuff about game developers who
just
hate
generally.
gamers. I'm just like, then why are you in this field? Go make something else, right? And like, and it doesn't matter for what reason.
A gnat is bothering me.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter for what reason, right? It can be a personal reason.
There's plenty of reasons.
Like, just
you can apply it to whatever you want.
If you hate the audience for the thing you're making, don't make that thing. Like, legit, just you're at odds with the very audience that are going to give your thing and the time of day, right? And it goes along with the target audience and the expectations, right? Because like, and okay, so that kind of ties into, I think, to an extent, what really inspired this topic in me when I suggested it to you, because I've been seeing Sega lately, the video game company, and just a very, very brief background. Sai and I both grew up on Sega stuff. The first video game console we ever played, both of us, was Sega Genesis, because that's what my dad had when I was born, and that's all our family could afford all the way up until the GameCube. So both of us, our first video games were Sega Genesis games, namely Sonic the Hedgehog, but other Sega properties as well, and third-party games. So we're very familiar with Sega through our years growing up. So that's just a quick little history, primer.
Yeah.
Sega,
yeah, we talked about it more in the first episode, actually.
Yeah, true. Our intros onto who we are. So with Sega, they've had their ups and downs, right? And one of the such franchises was the Sonic franchise, which has had a lot of ups and downs. Now, we as individuals, we have the capability to kind of try something with an open mind, and then try to find its own merits for, instead of always comparing it to what came before or what we wish it was. We try to first find something to enjoy based on its own merits, and then we make an informed conclusion about it. That's kind of our approach to most media, right? Most entertainment. And so and informed doesn't always mean like we have to partake of it, consume it, whatever. But in the case of the Sonic franchise, since we grew up with it, we're pretty much willing to try almost every Sonic game that's accessible to us.
Yeah,
and
I don't
judge it on its own merits.
I don't knock it till you try it, though, because sometimes you don't
know before you try it.
You don't gotta eat a omelet to know it's burned. If you like look at it and it's just charred black, sometimes you can just tell. Yeah,
but as people who grew up on Sonic, we will give almost every Sonic thing a try, like official Sonic thing, a try, and judge it based on its own merits, right? Its own failings, shortcomings, and successes. But the franchise has had a lot of ups and downs, and I would say, because Sonic Forces, we can both agree, was definitely a fail. It was a failure in that it was too mediocre. It had so much potential, and it failed to live up to any of that potential. It just ended up being a bland, mediocre, just kind of tasteless product, right? It wasn't offensively bad. It wasn't offensively broken and unplayable. It was just meh, right? And Sega knew it because they released it not at full price, right? They released it at, I think, $40. So they knew it wasn't a $60 product.
Yeah, like there are different kinds of failure, because it just in Sonic, that'd take up too much time. But we have two, brilliant examples of it where Sonic 06 was it could have been like a Michelin meal, and then it came out raw. Right?
Yeah, it could have been Sonic Adventure 3, but
Sonic Forces was slapping a slice of American cheese between two slices of white bread.
There's a hint of taste there. It's yo, this could have been something nice, especially with the Infinite before, like when he still had all the mystique around him and the mystery.
Disappointing.
He had so much potential, and then he was disappointing. So that's what it was. It was disappointing, right? It wasn't offensively bad. It was disappointing. Now
I feel like I felt like I was like on the schoolyard trading like conspiracy theories back with leading up to Sonic Forces, because I don't remember where I saw this, but I saw someone say that like, this was going to be leading in from
Mania.
No, Generations with like the Time Eater and Eggman and Robotnik being trapped in the white space, right? And there was this. I swear I saw somebody say that they thought like Infinite was going to be like Tails from an altered timeline where Eggman and Robotnik were able to get back from white space and use what they learned from the Time Eater to like change the timeline, which was why, you know, you see in the trailers of Forces like everything looks all, you know, dark and dismal, because it was going to be like the timeline changed and suddenly Eggman is in control, because he like finally accepted, nothing that I ever, or like the past Robotnik accepts, I've seen the future and nothing that I ever do will beat Sonic, so I'll kidnap Tails early instead and change the whole timeline. And I realized later, how stupid was I? Infinite has one tail.
True. Because weren't they even thinking about that, like, what was it, that Game Gear alternate timeline Sonic 2 where Tails gets kidnapped and in the bad ending you don't save Tails?
Oh yeah, he's just dead. I forgot about that. You see him in the stars, right, he's a constellation.
Deep cut right there. Yeah, Sonic's look at the end. Sonic looks at the sky and you see Tails' face in the
or kind of like the ending of, well, spoilers for Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. Nothing else is ever gonna. But yeah, but like at the end of the game where you come back from the other world and Eggman, since he was left behind while you take care of business, he's taken over during
because time passes slower where you were. So by the time you come out, he's conquered the world, which is so similar to the concept behind, you know, the premise of Sonic Forces. It's like such good potential. A world where Eggman actually conquered is so.
Anyway, we're in left field. We're in Sonic field.
So anyway, going back to what I was saying, after the disappointment that was Sonic Forces, Sonic Frontiers happened, and it hit right for both of us. We both enjoyed it so much.
Yep.
It was just such a hit. It was so good. And then
Twitter started hating Ian Flynn. Oh my God, he makes too many references. Shut up.
That's what he does. What he does, though, is he takes things from the threads from the past and he connects them. He's good at
he literally did that with Archie Sonic comics.
Yeah, he's good at taking past lore and making it make sense.
Lore did a whole bunch of videos on it.
Yeah, you basically call him the lore keeper to an extent. But yeah, so honestly, I like his work. But regardless, we both greatly enjoyed Frontiers. Yeah, it had some little wrinkles that could have been ironed out.
There were some rough parts, but
It was a little unfinished at certain parts of it were unfinished by the end, right? And the final boss was a left field that a lot of people, you know, it disappointed them because their expectations that were set by all the boss fights before that. We get it. We totally get it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough to make us dislike the entire package. All in all, it was a great game. And it was definitely like Sega was cooking on that one.
The DLC also had its own issues.
Yeah, it had its own issues, but that final boss fight was pretty hype. Although it was frustrating at certain points how there's certain details about it that were not,
but it was cool,
very clearly indicated. So, but you know, all in all, great product, and definitely showed potential of what they can do going forward if they follow that same formula and just, you know, evolve it a bit, refine it. And then Sonic X Shadow Generations with the Shadow campaign. So good. I also heard that apparently they touched up the gameplay of the Sonic portion of that as well. Like they actually refined the gameplay to feel better and more responsive.
You know something else too. I know this isn't quite on the topic, but I just want to say too, like one of the things that I really enjoy about Ian Flynn is like, obviously he's not a perfect writer, nobody is, but
Yeah.
it's really obvious that he likes the thing that he's writing for, which is very rare nowadays.
True.
You know?
He's passionate about it. And you can feel that love in the reverence he gives to the past, right? The lore of the past games. And how he tries to do it justice and give it respect and tie it in a cohesive way.
It is helpful when the person making a thing likes the thing that they're making, because you know, like,
and that's what I said earlier, right?
Fans shouldn't always write their, you know, the thing that they like. You know, sometimes they could take it in weird directions.
Yeah. But it's like I said earlier, right?
Yeah.
Do something that you enjoy. If you enjoy it, the passion will be, you know, the heart will be in it, or at least it will be more apparent to the audience, right? And like compared to Michael Bay with the Transformers series, how he didn't really care for it, and you could kind of tell because of some of the wacky decisions.
That's the vibe that I get. I don't think he ever said that in particular. But
no, he said it. I think he said in an interview that he was never really a big fan of Transformers.
The more clear-cut example that I can think of was Zack Snyder with Superman.
Oh gosh, yeah,
and Batman.
Yeah, honestly,
like,
have you watched the teaser?
I still haven't watched the teaser.
I watched it, and I'm not going to spoil details.
I've seen people talking. I've seen people talking about it on Twitter and being happy that like he's, you know, actually trying to save people and such. So
I'm cautiously optimistic. From the vibes of the trailer, of the teaser trailer anyway, it has some elements of reference for the classic Superman in it. Yeah. Like I actually kind of, so far it looks pretty decent.
But like this connects back into the topic though, because when you get a writer like Zack Snyder, right, who doesn't like Superman or Batman the way that they were, right? And so he's like, these characters are weird, I'm going to change them. Then you kind of ruin them for the characters that did get them, because you didn't get them and you thought that they should be changed, right? So that does a disservice to the fans, because you think you like the characters, but you just think certain things are downsides that are upsides. So like, yeah.
And so like I said earlier, you know, do something that you actually enjoy, and the passion and heart will be more apparent to the audience. You know, or at the very least have a pulse on the audience, right? Have a finger on the pulse. Like, at least know what the audience of this thing wants. Even if you're not passionate about it, but you want to make something successful, you kind of have to have a finger on the pulse of what the audience wants.
Yeah, and that is another thing though too. The fans are not always right.
No, hang on. Before we get to that, I do want to say more of what made me think of this, because Sega, they are really cooking now, because Sonic X Shadow Generations was good, especially the Shadow portion. Shadow Story was great. I loved it. It was so fun. It was very enjoyable from a gameplay standpoint, and it was very enjoyable from a story standpoint. They gave Shadow a good characterization in it too. He didn't feel like he was flanderized like he had been in some other stuff. Especially like Sonic Boom. Oh gosh.
The funny thing is,
character in Sonic Boom.
The funny thing is, there were some. Well, Sonic Boom is kind of like a parody of a show, and you can enjoy it if you think of it like that.
Yeah,
but
it's actually a pretty good show as a parody comedy.
The funny thing, it's got Sonic Boom. The show has kind of an old school like comedy cartoon vibe to it. Kind of like the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon.
The original one.
The not Freedom Fighters one. Adventures.
Yep, Adventures.
Hedgehog. Yeah, with the sloths and stuff. But where it's not like an action show, it's a comedy show where some action happens. But the funny thing is, there were some like changes, especially like retroactive changes to Sonic Generations that people didn't necessarily like in Sonic X Shadow Generations. But if you give a good product, you will also be forgiven a certain amount for other things that
speaking of
may
the
not land
changes,
well.
some of them were actually for the better. So like For example, you remember, oh gosh, remember at the end of Generations, you got this, Sonic. You know, Shadow's line.
Yeah.
And that's so not Shadow. That's not something Shadow would say. That would, if the delivery was awful, it was just a bad line. They've changed it in Sonic Shadow Generations.
Okay.
Where he's like, on your feet, you're not done yet. In a more calm way, which is much more of a, you know, like, come on, we both know you're better than this. You're the only person who, you know, you're the only person who can challenge me. We both know
I was just about to say almost the base
you're not done.
Vibes of like, don't, you can't lose to anyone other than me.
It's like come on, we're equals. Get up, you know. Like, you're not done yet. I wouldn't be done yet. Get up. But, you know, which is much more on point. So there are some changes that were for the better. Now,
Sega for a while had an issue though of like overcorrecting things, which it seems like that isn't completely gone yet, even though they've been doing a lot better. But like there was, for instance, the Amy bio change of like getting rid of like references to her crush on Sonic, because like I still don't think that it was written very well for a period of time after, like, I want to say Sonic Adventure 2. Like after Sonic Adventure 2 is when the Amy Dark Ages started happening. This Nat is,
but you don't need to be ashamed of it to the extent that you try to like revisionist write it out of the canon.
Yeah, like just don't write her as a
write her that she grew up, that she
manic
matured.
Psycho stalker, but like still have her, you know, that still should be part of her character.
Well,
and also just the weird like Rouge's outfit isn't backless anymore. Like, how do her wings fit through then?
Yeah, that part doesn't.
Physics.
I mean, it's just like, that's such a nothing burger thing. The back of the outfit, whatever.
Well, like,
but regardless, but Sega is mostly cooking. Like the Shadow story was great. The
people have just gotten very, very sensitive to like retcons and retroactive changing stuff. So even comparatively small things can trigger a hold up.
But overall, Sega's cooking with Sonic franchise, and then another franchise that is making a comeback. Well, for one, we know the Like a Dragon series is really loved by its audience. So that's been like really single-handedly been I think Sega's big money maker for a while. And then Virtua Fighter is coming back, and if anyone knows us in our history or has been with the channel for a while, they know that we love Virtua Fighter. In fact, Virtua Fighter videos were some of the first videos I ever uploaded on YouTube. So we love that series, and it has been dormant for a while. It was dormant for a long time, then it got a re-release, but only on, it was like a facelift re-release, but only on PlayStation, and then it was dormant again for a few years, and we've been wanting it on PC for a long time. And then now they're finally releasing it on PC, Virtua Fighter 5, and then they gave a snippet of Virtua Fighter 6, which looks promising, and have been talking about their, you know, vision for it and stuff like that. And I am decently cautiously optimistic about Virtua Fighter 6. We'll see if they make changes to it to kind of, you know, like other fighting game long-running franchises have been doing. But so far, with Virtua Fighter 5, Sonic, Like a Dragon, Sega is cooking. They are doing right by their audiences, I would say, in large. They are doing good. They are winning right now. They are there, and they also announced that they're bringing back old franchises, long dormant old franchises, in addition to Virtua Fighter, like Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio and Golden Axe. Like they are bringing back like cult classics, you know, like that haven't gotten anything new in more than 2 decades, I would say.
Now
at this point,
but that connects to the point though that you need to know which fans to listen to, because like, I mean, our, you know, the biggest example of that I could think of, that probably both of us can think of, is Sonic in the, I want to say like late 2000s, early 2010s, late 2000s through the 2010s, really.
Okay.
Right. where they basically had two halves of the fan base,
Yeah.
and whenever one was happy, the other wasn't, and they always listened to the people who weren't happy. So everything just kept changing.
True.
And it was impossible to get a good footing. They didn't know they didn't know when to just ignore some of them and say, okay, we have a lot of people saying this worked, and they would also throw the baby out with the bathwater and half the time, and not really keep some elements that really worked in games would get thrown out the next time around.
Yeah,
and they would get some new things right and some other things wrong.
Well, it's and a good illustration for this is like being a cook, right? Like you have this dish that you're trying to perfect, and you have people tasting it, and they tell you, okay, this part of it is good, but it's a little lacking in this aspect, right? Like, oh, maybe it's a little too salty here, or a little too greasy, or what have you. And
then you just
don't
have
say,
the other half saying, I don't like chicken.
Yeah, and so you don't say, well, okay, I guess I'm just not going to make this chicken dish anymore. I'm going to make a completely different dish instead. No, what you do is you iterate upon what you're working on. You take the feedback and you use that to refine and fine-tune it, to shore up the weaknesses, to fill up some of the little holes, right? And make a better product next time that's similar enough to what came before, but better, right? And you iterate and you iterate and reiterate until you get it right. Then once you get it right, you stick with that a bit, and then you can experiment in little ways, right? To try and make it a little better or a little different, and maybe pull some of that audience that didn't like it initially in without changing the whole, right? Without changing the core of what you've gotten right. I think that's the best way to go about it, really. Pick your audience, decide who you're going to listen to and how much. And I think that's what I want to go into next, is how much do you listen to your target audience? But to finish this thought, pick your audience, pick how much, decide how much you're going to listen to them, and then take that feedback into account along with your own vision, through the lens of your own vision, and you iterate. That's the way to go, right? You don't have to throw out, like you said, the baby with the bathwater. Don't just ditch a formula entirely because you got some negative feedback, right?
I'm realizing I'm probably dating myself with that. Maybe some people don't know what that means. It means don't get rid of the good stuff with the bad.
Yeah. And so, so then the next thought I wanted to go into in this is, how much do you listen to that audience that you're trying to serve, right? Because you've picked your audience that you want to serve your product to, and then so now you're focused, right? You're not trying to appeal to an audience that just doesn't care for what you're making, right? You're not trying to court an audience that will want you to change it entirely, because I think that's important, right? Honestly, a lot of these companies seem to be doing that. And just a quick aside, we're seeing some of that come back to bite Bandai Namco, regarding Tekken 8, because they have been bleeding all of their longtime players, like myself, because of a lot of the changes and new additions. When they initially released, they got a lot of new players, but not all of those new players are sticking around, and then a lot of the passionate old heads weren't around to begin with because they don't like Tekken 8 because of it's too different. And so now it's starting to have a little bit of trouble. The overall online vibe I'm seeing around it is largely negative.
Okay, because on the one hand, right, a company wants to grow, right? And if you just stick to only serving the customers that you have, then you don't have the opportunity or you don't have as much opportunity to get more, right?
And that's why I mentioned earlier, experiment with little things, right? That don't change the core experience, but make it more approachable to people who are on the outside.
So I see it on that regard, but on the other hand, it can become a snare because
Infinite expansion is not possible.
Especially companies. Yes, that was just what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth. Companies, especially since they aren't a person, right? They're an entity that only cares about higher number, right? But the paper, the numbers on paper basically lie to them, saying like, oh, there is this larger number that we can add to the number that we already have, and that will be better. But you can't. The infinite expansion is the white whale.
Yep, it's impossible.
You'll lose something greater by continuing to chase it. You can't just be satisfied with staying where you are, because staying where you are, you'll eventually go down instead of
you don't want stagnation. Spot. Stagnation results in a decline eventually.
But pushing too hard for rapid expansion only creates a crash.
Exactly. And so that, I think,
especially because, like you said, the new audience isn't as loyal as the old audience.
Exactly, because the new audience wants whatever's new and is more likely to be distracted by something else that's new and shiny and go to that instead, after a time. So basically, by seeking out the new audience at the expense of the old audience, like full stop, you may get more money, more sales, whatever, in the short term, but then you lose your long-term credibility and longevity, right?
And that's assuming that the new audience is even people who are willing to spend money on it in the first place. Sometimes they're just people who are complaining about what you do, but they're never actually going to give you a dime.
Yeah, they don't put their money where their mouth is. Exactly. And if
you slight the paying customers for the complaining customers, then you lose even more.
Oh yeah. And so and honestly, that's what, I'll be honest, to briefly go into the fighting games, which is part of the root of our podcast here, what we originally focused on. But one of the big reasons why we pivoted away from that focus was to not be so narrow, but also because I was losing a lot of my passion for fighting games, because so many of the franchises that I've enjoyed for 10 plus years, in some cases 20 years, 22 years, were changing so much that they ended up alienating me and just, pushing me away to seek out an audience with completely different tastes, right?
I feel like we've talked about this.
Yeah, and that's why we're not going to go into super big detail.
Food.
Yeah, we're not going to go into super big detail on this, but that is what is happening with Tekken 8 right now. That is what happened with Soul Calibur 6, at least in my case, and with some others. Yeah, there's others who also share my take on that as well. Some feel the way about DOA 6. I feel less so about DOA 6 because I think the meter didn't impact the flow of and feel of the game that much, just because it had an equal application offensively and defensively, so it didn't uproot the balance like Heat does in Tekken 8, where it pushes the game so far into offense that you lose all the defensive capabilities and players who like those kind of capabilities, right? A big chunk of your audience there. And so Virtua Fighter comes in and it's well, let's re-release, the facelift of this 13-year-old game. And then on top of the facelift, let's give it a little some balance tweaks, but let's keep the whole core intact. So, and some of the changes that I've seen for Virtua Fighter 5 Revo are, let's make this game a little bit more approachable. Like, for example, they brought all the character weights in closer to center, so you don't have to know a different BNB for every character, basically. They took it away from that Guilty Gear direction, of such specific character weights effect and such specific combos for each weight class, and they're bringing it more towards center, so you can focus on other aspects of the game, right? I think that's an overall improvement that doesn't fundamentally change what makes the game fun and what makes it what it is, its identity. So that's just a net positive. And they're doing little changes like that. Like they've buffed some of the characters who struggle a little bit. They've nerfed some of those super strong characters to bring them closer to center as well. And, it's the game that all the longtime fans already loved, but now more accessible because it's on modern hardware with good online netcode once it releases in January. We already had an open beta for it. And it's more approachable with those little tweaks to people who may be new and interested in checking it out. And it's going to be released at, I think the base game is going to be $15, or at least on sale. And then it's like 20 or 30, something like that, standard.
Ooh.
So like approachable.
Wish my PC was good enough to actually play the game.
Yeah, but like, you know, an accessible price. It's on current hardware, and PC meaning it'll be purchasable by people for a long time. You know, and you know, even if a lot of us long-time fans don't end up liking Virtua Fighter 6, well, we still have 5 Revo, don't we? In an accessible form. So that's a win-win, right? Everybody wins. Everybody gets something they want. That's how you do it. You know, they are showing Bandai Namco how it's done. So to get,
you know what
back,
that reminds me of?
What?
We were talking about, you know, Sonic earlier, obviously, because like the whole two halves of the fan base like always disagreeing about what they want.
Yeah.
I think Sega realized with the release of Sonic Mania, like, we can just do 2 kinds, right? You know,
like that commercial. Por qué no los dos? Like, why not both?
Yeah, like serve both tables, one for you, one for you, one for you, one for you. Like, and they tried to continue that with Sonic Superstars. Now, Sonic Superstars has its own issues, but it's not bad. It still like Mania was another thing entirely.
Yeah.
I hope they take the right lesson from Sonic Superstars. Not that it was not the way to go, but
bring the Mania
how to improve it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like
honestly, if they give
Sonic Mania caused that,
if they give the foundation,
we can just make 2 different things instead of trying to please everyone with the same thing. Because if you have like you know, with the food metaphor, right? If you make chicken parmesan and one table doesn't like chicken and the other doesn't like spaghetti sauce, don't just throw out the chicken parmesan, okay? Maybe you can, you know, make some fried chicken for one plate and some spaghetti for the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Boom, everyone wins.
Yep. Chicken Alfredo for one and spaghetti for the other, something like that, right? To keep it with Italian. Like, yeah. Diversify your offerings, right? That way you can keep, you can still keep your vision intact in different ways. You could try new things out too with that variety.
Because for a while it seemed like
definitely experimented with the 2D formula, right?
Yeah.
And
for a while it seemed like they were trying to please everyone, but when you try to please everyone with one thing, then you please nobody enough.
I would definitely say that's a downside of like Sonic Generations, is like, you know, trying to squeeze the 2D and 3D into one game. Because then there were some people, even though I loved it, because I've played both. You same for you. But there were some people who were like, I didn't care for the 2D stages, or I didn't care for the 3D stages. So split it up, right? So you've got your 3D Sonic game, then you've got your 2D Sonic games. And, you know, I don't hate Sega for experimenting in Sonic Superstars. They tried the whole co-op play and the abilities and stuff like that. Like, it had some promise, right? There's some potential there if they can just fine-tune it. You know, it didn't exactly stick the landing the best way, I would say, because like the co-op focus made it so that the bosses ended up being long and plodding with a lot of waiting and a lot more iframes.
And also the stage design seemed to just like the team, you could feel that the programmers or the designers were just like running out of steam at the end of
But the first half of the game was way better than the last half. So, you know, there's some promise. There's a good foundation there.
The sleepless nights.
Yeah, there's a good foundation there. So just, you know, fine tune it, right?
And I think it's you can see the difference, because like it can be illustrated by the difference between Mario and Sonic, right? Because Mario has always been like, Mario is Mario. You're coming here for Mario. We ain't changing a thing.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
The 2D platformers and
like,
the 3D platformers.
Mario basically saved gaming, right?
Yeah.
Just by being what it decided to be.
Mhm.
So Nintendo was like, "You'll be back. You're here.
Yeah.
You know what you want."
But they still diversify using all the
But-
spin-offs, right?
Well, but for a while, it became repetitive. You couldn't tell the difference between one
New Super
Mario
1
game and
and 2
another.
and
You got Super Mario Bros. Wii, New Super Mario Brothers, New Super Mario Bros. 3D. You got whatever. Like,
yeah, they did
there are
get
a
real
bunch of them that
homogenous.
it felt like The Rock. Like you look at 4 different Rock movies and you don't know which one's which. Like
Yeah.
it's. But Sonic was born from being the alternative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sega does what Nintendo don't. You're here for something different. But eventually, and so they're inherently more experimental, but it became too experimental at a point. Like, but like when they originally made the true transition to 3D, right? With Sonic Adventure, that was very experimental. What you have, like, you had, first of all, completely new thing with just Sonic levels with 3D. Then you also had, well, I mean, Tails was kind of the same thing. It was just you were racing against Sonic. But then you have the Amy levels, which are a completely different thing. You have the Gamma levels, which are another completely different thing. You had fishing with Big the Cat. There are no rules.
Yeah, I know, right?
And then they tightened it up with Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah,
but then
3
they
different gameplay sites.
kept experimenting, and they started experimenting too much. You have On the Rails with
Secret
Sonic and the Secret Rings. You have Wiimote waggling on the rails with Black Knight. You have beat 'em up levels with Sonic Unleashed. And
Yeah.
like I've even talked about this on Twitter. I think Sonic Unleashed almost would be considered the best 3D Sonic game
if it weren't
if
for the werewolf.
there was a lot more of the day stages and not as much of the night stages.
Yep, and if the night stages were shorter, because the problem was they were so much longer that they took up more game time, more play time than the day stages. The day stages
And
were
by
over
God,
quicker.
give us another battle music.
Oh yeah, not enough writing about music. God, that is still to this day ingrained into my memory. Like I'm
You
remembering.
get into that fight the first time and you're like, oh man, this big band is pumping. Then like the dozenth time you're like,
This big band needs to learn a new
you
song.
stop.
But yeah, and so you're right, like a bit too much. Like, and I hope that they learn and do more iterative stuff now. And it seems like they are kind of
Yeah.
are.
And it's funny too because Mario also, well, Nintendo also learned from their problems with Mario with Super Mario Bros. Wonder, right?
Yeah, they did. It
They
is a
actually
fresh
got
take on the
more
2D
experimental.
platform. Yeah, and a lot of people loved it. I still haven't played it, but I want to. Like, it's the first 2D Mario that actually makes me want to play it.
I've played it one time with a friend and his family. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it looks fun. It's just those games never drop in price, so I don't know when I'm going to spend $60 on a 2D Mario game. That's the main problem. So
Yeah.
the game's not enough money, not enough time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the little iterativeness, right? Like don't change everything entirely to try and chase new audiences over and over and over, because then you're gonna have no identity, right? But then if you don't change
like I
enough,
said,
then it gets stagnant.
a company is a company. They don't look at it from an artist perspective, right? And be like, okay, this didn't work, but these aspects are good about it. A company looks at a failed product and says, nothing about this was good. Throw it out. Back to the drawing board.
Yeah, unfortunately. So let's go into the next part of the topic, which is when you have your target audience and you know who to listen to, how much do you listen to them? Because the thing is, we already know, right, that if you... Okay, how do we put this? Even within a more narrowed target audience or a more focused target audience, you're still going to have varied voices. But if you... How do we put this? If you try to make the product... I'm trying to think. I had a good way to put it earlier and I forgot. So the idea is, if you have a vision, but then you sacrifice your vision and blindly follow audience feedback, your product is worse for it. More often than not, right? You got to take feedback, but you can't let them dictate what you do and how you do it. I think that's the best way to put it.
Well, I mean, because unfortunately, it's difficult sometimes, probably for, developers, people making the games, right, to figure out who knows what they're talking about, especially if the people making the games don't have enough time to experience a lot of games in that genre, right? If they're busy making this stuff, they might not necessarily be like, Masahiro Sakurai, where he's like, he's still be playing games.
Yeah. I mean, after all, Smash Brothers was made as a result of his experiences being a high-level King of Fighters player and beating someone so bad that they quit the game forever, as far as he knows. So it's just like, oof, so he's been in the trenches, so to speak, and he took that experience, and that's what shaped what became one of the, the highest selling fighting game / fighting game tangential or whatever related, depending on how you view it, franchise in the world, right? Yeah,
but you need to, and like, for instance, with fighting games especially, because fighting games have the continuous task of trying to keep everything relatively balanced, right? I say relatively because you can't go too far with it, or else it'll just get too homogenized, right? Like,
and I would say that's the case for all PvP games, really, because in shooters, it's instead of characters, it's like gear or weapons, right? Where it's like, people are complaining about this one thing, so we're gonna overcorrect and undertune it too much.
Yeah, you can analog it, however you want to PvP. Like, I'm more often going to use fighting games as an example, but if you're a shooter player, you can think of it like, whenever I say, this character or this move, and think of it as like, this weapon or this character, right? In a shooter, in a hero shooter, for instance. But you need to be able to sort what people are complaining from a place of emotion and ignorance, or those who are giving reasoned, arguments, right?
Yeah.
Because like sometimes it's, I don't like zoners. They make me angry,
Well, generally, and
that doesn't necessarily mean
they never even say
too powerful.
They never even say it that eloquently. Usually, it's like, this fireball is overpowered, or this character is lame. This character it sucks to fight against. This character is too strong. Like, you can generally tell by
this character
how
is
they
toxic.
Put it. Yeah, you can generally tell by how they put it, right? like.
Yeah.
But you have to listen to the people you have to listen to the thinkers, I would say.
And like,
but the problem is,
and one of the biggest issues with that is the popular voices, right? Because popularity does not necessarily mean someone knows what they're talking about. It means that they're charismatic enough, or they strike a chord with people enough for others to,
even though
enjoy listening to them.
Often equated to correctness in our in the modern world, but that's not the truth. That's not actually reality. Is the popular voice is not always correct. If anything, it's usually the people. Like, there's a phrase I love: the people who can best see the whole picture are those who can step outside the frame. The people who are able to put the feelings to the side to think through it logically enough, or like step outside of look past their nose, right? The tip of their nose. Like, I'm a fan of this thing, so I'm going to look at it from solely the viewpoint of a super fan. But no, that usually creates bias. So you're like, okay, I need to look at this from the perspective of someone who's more in the middle of the road, right? Someone who's like a more casual fan. How do they interact with this thing? How does it affect their experience as well? Okay, now compare that to how it affects my experience as a hardcore fan. All right, so what's the middle ground between that? What's the best change that would benefit the most of your audience, your target audience? Right? Like stuff like that. Like, this character is really strong in these aspects. So, but at a high level, right? Like competitive level, okay. this is what the competitive level players are saying needs to be changed. Now, let's look at the data and see what the stats say about the majority of the player base, the people who are not going on to social media to complain about it, right? What does the information say about them? Which more often than not ends up being at odds with the hardcore / competitive niche portion of said target audience.
That's another thing too, because sometimes people can get sucked into this idea that social media represents
the majority,
the greater population of a certain group, when they really don't. They represent the loud parts of a group.
yeah. Social media is usually the loud minority, the people who care enough to go on there and type up a message about it, a post about it, right? Those are not they're almost never the majority, right?
Yeah, so to be fair, you could also weigh how many people are complaining about this on social media versus, I don't know, sale. Well, okay, you can't really compare everything to sales, so I don't know how you
yeah, well, I just find it interesting because I've seen cases with for example, fighting games or Smash Brothers or whatever, where the competitive or hardcore scene says that the so-and-so character is awful, but then when you look at the actual win-loss data by character, the majority of the player base data shows no, actually this character's more middle of the road, showing that they're actually relatively balanced. It's only when you get to a certain level that the character becomes bad, right? A certain skill level that only ever really represents the minority of the audience. So then you kind of have to decide, which audience do you listen to, right? Or do you try to find a middle ground that can kind of, at the very least, create an experience that benefits the most people, like I said, out of your target audience. And it's interesting. I do not envy the people who are in those kind of roles, because it is a never-ending rat race. But you have to decide, who do you listen to, and then you have to decide how much, because even if you're making a product for a niche audience, you can't just let their every complaint decide what you're going to do with your product, right?
Yeah.
Because then you're not making it, they are, right? And you just can't let it get to that point. I don't think there's been any cases where doing that has resulted in a better result, right? Listening to the audience too much never turns out right. Because while the customer is always right in matters of taste, as in what they like, they are not always right in what is best for what you are trying to make. That's the thing to keep in mind.
These different topics just always end up feeling like Groundhog's Day, because are we just saying again that the answer is moderation?
Well, the problem is the answer to so many things is moderation.
Because you can't make a product by committee, or else it'll just end up indistinguishable, kind of
slop.
Yeah, I was actually looking for a different word than slop to get out of my brain. But then if you're no, I have all the answers, ha ha ha, then and you don't allow anyone to tell you when you have a bad idea, then that's also a problem. I mean, we all know, it's a common example, George Lucas, great writer, made some generational stuff. Even geniuses have bad ideas, and if they don't have someone to tell them when an idea is bad, things can get weird.
Yeah,
and especially sometimes when it comes to geniuses, because geniuses tend to be a bit eccentric.
Yep. And then
gotta have someone down to earth to be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and honestly, and on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the problem in with a lot of modern creation is the people, because people are so oversensitive to dissenting opinions and feedback, that they end up in an echo chamber, and then you have no one to challenge you and tell you when something is a bad idea. And then all the bad ideas
sensitive,
fly.
or sensitive to the idea of shooting down bad ideas. Like, sometimes you have to. I'm sorry, sometimes you have to. Okay,
Well, apparently that's part of from what I've seen. There's actually some information I've seen where that's actually part of the issue with the modern comic industry. American comic industry is, back in the day, the editor, and they still practice this in manga over in Japan. The editor is supposed to be is the person who tells the writer, okay, this isn't a good idea, this really won't work, or this won't sell, right? This won't get good ratings. So can we change this to improve it? Just this aspect of the thing. Not saying change the whole darn thing into a completely different genre, but like this aspect of it, not a great idea for the audience we're aiming for. Can you change this to make it more appealing to our target audience?
Yeah, and you take the good with the bad, but I do think that's essential because, like for instance, the Android Saga in Dragon Ball Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, comments, correct me if this story is wrong, but from what I remember, I saw said that in the Android Saga, Gero and Android, what was he? 19? 19, the pale fat one.
No, that's not 19.
That was 19.
No, there was oh wait, you're right. He was 19 and Gero himself was technically number 20.
Yeah, 19 and Gero were originally going to be the two androids that were the big bads, but then the editor, I don't know if it's one or multiple, said like, I don't know, that seems kind of lame. Can we get new ones? And so
anticlimactic.
And so 17 in it, well, just like an old man and a weird big pale robot dude.
Yeah,
just seemed like kind of feel like, oh, the readers are gonna think that's a little lame. So then 17 and 18 get made, but then the editor's like, 2 kids though? Come on. And then so we get Cell.
And Cell is iconic.
Yeah, and people love the Android Saga.
Yeah.
Sometimes the editor does good.
Yep, pretty much. And so like, but apparently in the modern American comic or Western comic industry, editors are discouraged from telling the writer no. Literally. And so that's why so many comics have flopped, because they're full of bad ideas, and we're not going to go into whatever different ideas of reasons why an idea could be bad or whatever. We're just saying bad ideas as a general holistic approach to the idea.
Well, I just, and I mean, I've experienced personally in different ways, but like a lot of people are very averse to negativity in any way. But sometimes negativity is not actually, it's not malicious or destructive. Like sometimes you can't be too positive all the time.
Well, the problem is people are too willing to label a negative as negativity, as in taking it to an extreme. Like,
okay.
Right? Because like a negative, right? Negative reinforcement, like, no, this idea is bad. That's negative reinforcement, yes, but it's not toxic. It's not harmful. It's just saying this is a bad idea. And the point is to take that and to then reconsider with a new perspective.
And like, well, it's not necessarily... Yeah. Well, credit. Ding!
But yeah, so literally, like, it's not negativity. They're not like dragging you down. They're not tearing you down and
it was like someone's
give up.
Someone saying something that is not positive is taken by some types of people as
bad.
And I've experienced that a lot. Not necessarily in like writing or whatever. I'm not in any writing rooms, but like in general, I am predisposed to noticing inconsistencies, blemishes, things that are incorrect. That's how my brain works. I'm not malicious. I just can't help but see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I I try my best not to be mean about it and to convey it. And I've had to learn, especially how to layer honey over my words, as you could say, to make sure people don't get like triggered at it, right? Like I'm not one of those people who is like, oh, I'm just being honest. You thinking that like brutal honesty is just an excuse to be a jerk, right? But like I want to correct mistakes so that an end result can be better.
Yeah.
It's not destructive. It's a cutting out of the imperfections.
Yeah. So the way I like to say it, because I still see people say it to this day, and I'm just thinking that it's so wrong. But the whole idea that people are taught as a kid, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything.
I knew that's what you're gonna say.
Yeah, that only works with children, because children don't understand the concept of tact yet.
Yeah, they don't have nuance.
They don't know how to say something without something that's not necessarily nice without being mean. They don't understand it yet. So you have to teach them to sometimes you have to zip your lip. Now, as you grow up, you're supposed to mature, you're supposed to learn things like tact, nuance, how to communicate effectively what you're trying to say without being just an utter jerkwad. And even if it's something of a more negative bent, right, you can turn it into something positive by making it constructive criticism.
Yeah. And sometimes you also gotta
the idea of if you don't have anything nice to say nothing at all is how you get toxic positivity and echo chambers. And that's exactly what results in worse products, because now you're not listening to those who can give you feedback in a way that benefits what you're making, whether that be people who are on your team, or whether that be the audience that we're talking about in this podcast, right? That you should at least to some extent listen to, because you're targeting them for your product, right? So you do have to listen. You should listen to them a little bit, right? You shouldn't just say, if you don't like what I am making, then you're not in my audience. Like, that's not quite how it works, like come on, don't hate your audience, don't completely disregard your audience's feedback on the thing, but don't let them outright make it for you. Don't just leave all the decisions to them either. You stick to your guns in some ways. You have to learn how to pick your battles, right? Some things, and I know you said that we kind of always end up going towards moderation as being the answer, but that is because moderation is the answer to many issues nowadays that many people just seem incapable of. But the thing is, in this case, it's more nuanced than just moderation, because some things you should stick to your guns on. Like, if it's something that is crucial to your vision and your target audience, even if the majority of your target audience aren't quite with this one detail, sometimes you can say they'll get it once they experience the full product. Like we have seen some examples of subversion used to make a story better, right? Yeah, and the target audience ends up actually liking it more because of that subversion, because it was done tastefully and it was done in a way that builds up, that enhances the product rather than is malicious, right?
Well,
subversion is the issue.
That's the thing about subversion. Okay, sorry, this is going to be a tangent, maybe, I don't know, but subversion has become a kind of a dirty word because of how it's been done in the last decade. But like the problem with subversion is not necessarily subversion. It's this gnat is really bothering me. It's flying in my face. I swear, has no concept of personal space. The problem with subversion is not the subversion itself necessarily. It's when subversion is used to tear something down and nothing is built back up.
Yeah.
Because then there's no point to it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a story that used subversion in a good way to make something better.
Tales of Symphonia?
To an extent, yeah, actually, because like the way that the story starts and then they subvert a certain whole part of the world building, and nope, it's actually something entirely different, and now things are much bigger. Things have escalated.
Yeah, you have to build something after subversion, or it can't be subtractive. It needs to be additive.
Actually, yeah, in Tales of Symphonia, that subversion point is actually just the middle point of the story, when the turning point where things actually get really interesting. Like even more interesting, and like it gripped me at that point. That was the point where I got so hooked that I was literally playing almost nothing but that until I completed the story. So yeah, that is a good case of subversion. What else? There was a movie example. I seem to it's in the back of my head. I faintly remember it, but I'm not sure. Where the audience expectations on something was subverted, but it actually made made for a better thing. I mean, you can do that in a case of like, because of the overall vibes or setting, making people expect something, right? And then no, what you end up making ends up being actually better what they expected, right? Instead of following the same tropes, you can kind of subvert a trope to make it better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you're literally taking people's expectations of something that's kind of been overdone, right? And you're putting a spin on it that makes it interesting again. No examples are coming to my brain yet, which is a little concerning.
Concerning?
I don't know why.
What do you mean concerning? Hold on.
I'm just trying to think. But
yeah, I'm looking through my try to, because like okay, an example of like bad subversion, right? Injustice. What if Superman was evil?
Oh yeah, and now it's been overdone. Yeah.
Like it's okay. What are you gonna do with that? Oh no, that's it. Superman is evil. Great. Come on.
True.
It's not additive. It's just subtracting from the character.
Yeah. Justice League or Unlimited, I can't remember which one, did it better with the Justice Lords, right? Or what about Crisis on Two Earths, right? With Ultraman and those characters too. Like right. I think those were better examples of that. But
I wouldn't necessarily call that subversion.
No, it's not. You're right. Regardless, the last time we mentioned subversion, I had an example of a good example of subversion, and I can't remember it. My brain, I'm losing it. Huh.
A good example.
You know what? Something that we never watched, but I know a lot of people loved it for. Shrek.
Yeah?
The princess was a subversion. Right? She turned out to actually be an ogre, and people liked her character more because of
the whole movie was built on subversion. It was the point of the movie was actually subversion of Disney tropes, especially since a lot of the like prominent people working on it were like ex-Disney people, I believe.
True. Okay, I remembered a good example. Maybe this is the one we mentioned in the past, Megamind. Right? It was parody mixed with subversion. Right, because the character, like for example, Titan, right? He was a subversion of the nobody suddenly getting powers and having the chance to become a superhero, right?
Yeah.
He ended up becoming the actual villain, and then the villain, Megamind himself, actually turning into the hero because he was just misunderstood. Yeah,
like the main, like the three characters, Megamind, Metroman, and Titan are all subversions. So like. Metroman is, what if Superman decided he didn't enjoy being Superman, right?
Yeah.
Titan is, what if the nobody who gets powers doesn't turn out to be a good person?
Mm-hmm.
And Megamind is, what if the bad guy wasn't actually a bad guy?
And he was just
those are very simple on their face,
right?
But they take that and go from it and build something.
And that subversion through a lens of parody is what made it such a good movie.
And also, I guess Roxanne is like a subversion of the Lois Lane, basically like what if the damsel in distress actually wasn't in love with the superhero?
True, yeah. It's like, oh no, me and Metro Knight were never really a thing, even though everybody thought it.
Everybody
Honestly, he's not my
assumed,
type.
but no.
Yeah, she's like, everyone assumed it, but he's not my type. Just like, yeah, they subverted the Lois Lane Superman thing, or just the superhero movie in general, with the female lead being in love with the hero, right? So yeah,
I mean, yeah.
well, the superhero, whatever. The city
Yeah, like there's nothing
hero.
wrong with that, but like,
But yeah,
yeah, it's common.
But yeah, so that's a movie built upon subversion, and it did it right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's one
especially
of our
since
favorite
also
movies,
it was made before the superhero media boom. So like it was
it
before
made
its
before the
time.
MCU really hit?
Yeah, it was made before that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? The Incredibles is another one too. I think that has a healthy dose of subversion, right? With how like the golden age superheroes, and then all of a sudden they're outlawed, right? And so what happens when superheroes can't be superheroes anymore? And they end up having very normal human issues, right? Like Mr. Incredible going through a midlife crisis, of a normal guy midlife crisis as a superpowered being, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that has a healthy dose
But
of
like
subversion.
when
that made it good,
subversion
too.
is like, oh, you thought there would be a climactic duel, but then it is over in like 2 minutes. Like that's
bad
not
subversion.
that's
Yeah.
just you've disappointed.
Captain Marvel. When the guy's like, come on, fight me. Blasts him and it's over.
I was going to say Transformers, what was it? Dark of the Moon or Revenge of the It was Transformers Dark of the Moon. Oh, Optimus and Megatron have their rematch. And he's like, oh, who would you be without me? Let's find out. And then Optimus dog walks him in
With one
10
arm.
seconds.
With one arm. Oh, yeah. That's crazy.
It's like, thanks for ruining the final showdown, Bay.
I know, right? And that they did that, right? Because of like, what was it? The end of the story was leaked or something like that.
Yeah, like
So he's like, okay, well,
it was possibly because the end of the story got leaked by graphic novel tie-in being released like too early or something.
right. And so he's like, okay, well, time to subvert that ending in a way that made it worse.
You know what? Okay, kind of a different thing too. When people theorize, right? When people have a theory about the ending of something or like a twist or whatever, and there are some cases where arguably you could say that the theory turned out to be right, but then the people making the media decided, oh well, we can't let them have been right about that because that ruins the twist, and so they change it to something worse. Let them be right about it. Okay?
True. You know what? We've
them
seen
be
examples
right.
of that. And the thing is, if you're theory crafting and you're right, there's still a catharsis and a satisfaction of, I was right. You know, they still get a satisfying conclusion, even if they had kind of figured it out through, you know, their theory crafting. But we've seen okay, so that's an example. We've seen it go both ways. An example of listening to the audience too much in this way, where listening to the theories too much and then either trying to lean too hard into it. Like Hello
either
Neighbor.
changing it so that they're wrong or changing it so that they're right.
Yeah, like Hello Neighbor, I think was that example of changing it, trying to lean too hard into the theories to the point where they kind of basically let the audience kind of dictate the direction that the game went, and it ended up making it worse for it. But then we've seen examples.
No, that was a little different. They weren't leaning into the theories.
they were
they were
trying to make
leaning
theory
into
bait.
theory baiting.
Okay, so that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. But
And
regardless,
also there was a bunch of other issues, including like the AI of the characters, like just actually getting worse every time they updated the game somehow. I watched a whole video about it. It was interesting. But
okay,
yeah.
so the crux of what we were trying to say though is like, yeah, listening to the audience and then trying to change your product either to cater to them too much, like to the point where it becomes pandering, right? And you sacrifice your vision, or listening so much and then trying to maliciously subvert what they want. Say, no, what you want is bad, or you don't know what you want, so we're going to give you this and you're going to like it.
or you spoiled my fun because you're supposed to not see the twist coming. But like sometimes then people will make a twist in a way that there's no possible way that someone could see it coming, but then that makes it seem like it came out of nowhere. Yeah. Like this wasn't even a movie that I watched, right? But Frozen,
right?
And that being kind of the harbinger of the bad Disney twist villain, right? Because the character Hans basically has absolutely no sign of being evil up until the point that the twist happens, just so that the twist could be a twist and no one would see it coming. But that's just called no foreshadowing.
Right, trying to M. Night Shyamalan without doing the stuff he does to earn the twists.
I mean, he doesn't. I mean, half the time he doesn't earn the twist, but
I think that the meme about Shyamalan is that it's a 50-50 on whether or not it's actually
true.
Right,
like sometimes the twist is actually just completely
left field.
No, sometimes it's completely left field, but sometimes it's completely given away earlier in the movie. I've watched I've watched a bunch of videos about like things that I haven't even like
at this point video
watched or whatever. But like The Happening is a whole video and like a whole movie, and the twist is actually like spoiled earlier in the movie. Maybe he was trying to do a double twist where you think like, oh, that can't be the explanation, but it actually ends up being it.
Right.
Where like whatever was causing the like people to go crazy turned out to be like some weird thing being like spore being given off by plants or something. And somebody had suggested that it was the plants earlier in the movie, and then it's kind of ignored, and then it turns out to be right, and then the happening stops happening. Like you know, so yeah, either he like what's the word? Telegraphs it too much, or it comes out of left field. Apparently, it's like Shyamalan's reputation.
All right, that makes sense. Okay, so then what I would say too, because like obviously it's kind of a meme, but also I think there's a measure of truth to it, but like going back to games with Bandai Namco Tekken Team's Katsuhiro Harada.
Don't ask me for crap.
Like, I respect it in the way that like you don't want to let the audience, you know, control the product, right? But at the like, because I've seen people argue that the audience, like the most dedicated audience, has a measure of ownership over the IP. I don't think that's true. They can choose whether or not to support the IP for longevity, but they don't have ownership over it, right? Like, it's not one of those "we made you" kind of things. Like, no, you didn't.
It's a weird extension of the idea of death of the author.
Yeah, and I don't like the idea of death of the author either. I think the author's intention should be ultimately the thing that a creative work hinges on, because they're the one making it. It's coming from their brain. They should be the ones in control of that, rather than any kind of headcanon having actual sway on the way things go. And we've seen examples of headcanon becoming, you know, the creators listening to people's headcanons and then making it canon.
I have thoughts about that, the author, but I'm not. That's
another topic altogether.
It's
maybe that's a video for your
an
channel.
Aside thing. Maybe.
But yeah, so like I get the whole don't ask me for crap, as in like, you know, you're not going to be in control of the direction this thing goes in, but at the same time, you don't want to go to that extreme to where you ignore feedback from the people who give your thing life for beyond its initial release, right? So again, we got to come somewhere to center. Usually the best place to be is somewhere in center, somewhere closer to center in most everything. Like we said, moderation. That's kind of our motto on this podcast. But like, it's kind of sad, but like the new perspective we bring to many discussions is moderation. It shouldn't be new, but it kind of is because a lot of people don't know how, or they're incapable of it. Having a moderate approach to things, but like, yeah, find your audience, give them what they want to an extent. Give them what they want as long as it lines up with your vision for what you're making. That way you're happy with the product, and obviously not everyone's going to be happy. If you try to please everybody, nobody's going to be happy. So be content with the people who are happy with your product when you've taken feedback into consideration from your audience, your target audience, but you have to filter it through the lens of your vision. That's the key.
I mean, because if you're trying to make money, then you have to, accept that to an extent. Well, I mean, that you're making it not for you, but for them, right?
Yeah. And
so
the extent to which you're doing that, you need to budget accordingly. That way you're not sinking a ton of money into something and then, I have to appease to just the mainstream general audience, make a blob that has no real identity or focus to appeal to as many people as possible to make as much of that money back and revenue as possible. Like, budget accordingly so that you can do this. Sorry, that was a tangent of mine.
But so, what was I gonna say?
But yeah, you don't want to just, what you were saying was, hang on. What you were saying, you're saying that, you don't make it just for yourself.
There's always going to be compromise to be had.
Yeah. And you should try to find a way to do that in the most creative way possible that benefits the product and elevates it rather than makes it worse. That's where the creativity comes in, right? You have to take that feedback from the audience. You have to look at what your target audience wants, and then filter through the lens of your vision to make something that is distinctly yours, right? Distinctly your creation, right? Has an identity, but that, has a good balance between appealing to doing what you want and appealing to that audience, because the audience knows what they like. It's your choice how much you want to cater to that in balance with what you want to make. And, for what you're doing, depending on your expectations for your product, the degrees to which you're going to do that will vary. Just try to bring it somewhere closer to center. Yeah. I think that sums up the idea behind this. Should you give your audience what they want? Yeah, to an extent. You shouldn't try not to give them what they want. That's never a good idea. I think we can definitively say that. Should you give the audience what they want? Yes. The main question is, to what extent? The answer to that is never no.
Yeah.
Should you give your audience what you want? No. That is never the answer, because that's just a failure in by all purposes of creating a product, right? Of any kind. So, yeah, the answer is simple, yes, and then with nuance. So there you go. I think it's kind of cool to have a definitive conclusion like that, where we can say definitively, this is the answer. Because now, you know what? Do you disagree with us? Let us know in the comments. You may not convince us otherwise, but we like to hear the thoughts of people who disagree with us as well as the thoughts of people who agree with us. Mm-hmm. So, and every, part of the spectrum in between. So let us know what you think about what we said. Did anything we said, was it a new thought that made you think, I never thought of that before? Or did it make you get this feeling of they're wrong? Let us see it. Just be respectable and respectful in the way that you convey it, because we don't really entertain jerks. Like we said, we're not looking for an echo chamber. Just be constructive with it.
Yeah, and what was your favorite what's your favorite positive example of subversion in a piece of media? Maybe that's an interesting question. I feel like, because I feel like we missed some things we were trying to think about. Well, you were trying to think about it, and
I mean, I eventually
missed something, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there an example that you have of where someone subverted their audience's expectations and it either made it better or worse?
Yeah, it's not quite the topic of the episode, but if you don't have anything to say about the, I've been say whatever you want to on the topic of the episode, say whatever you want to about that. Just throwing it out there.
And then the main question
of the day.
Well, I would say the main question of the day, if there is one for this episode, would be, what is something that you enjoyed that ended up going in a different, like, is there anything that you enjoyed that either got better because they listened to the audience more or that got worse?
Yeah.
And whether or not they listen to the audience more or listen to the audience less, is there anything that you have either benefited from or has been a detriment to you on this topic? Has there been an example of something that you enjoyed that ended up just totally pushing you away because they listened to a different audience, right? Or they listened to the wrong people too much, like me with Dissidia NT. Actually, that was both of us.
I never actually played. No, I never even played.
Oh, okay, well, me with Dissidia NT.
I heard you talk about it. I said, say less. I'm not gonna even try.
Okay, yeah. Or was there something there where, like, the direction they were going in initially was a bit whack, and then they listened to the audience and it got better? I'm sure there's cases of that as well. So, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Actually, what am I talking about? Wait, hang on.
Mm-hmm. Are we done? I think we're done.
I think we're done. Our brain energy.
I think you're done.
My brain is running out of juice. Absolutely. I would love, maybe we can started like a new segment at some point and do like an addendum to different episodes or something. Actually, I already had an idea for that, and it was like second opinion, where I like bring someone else into the discussion. I need to go back to that.
I mean, or there could be or it could be like a video.
Well, that's what I was doing. Yeah, it was a video. I would upload it to podcast platforms too, but where I would discuss a topic that I already discussed either on the podcast proper or in my solo morning boot up that I was doing it for a while.
Well, yeah, but I mean like not streamed, more like
just
video content, or maybe even scripted content. Just throwing it out there.
Stuff to workshop. We'll workshop that off stream.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's it for today. We're going to call it quits here. My brain is running out of juice. I am back to doing this after work on Saturdays. So when we get towards that 2-hour point, I'm going to be like turning into a vegetable. So we've squeezed that lemon dry. So if you want to give any more feedback, or you want to, follow any other content that we make, you can find me, on the channel that you found this podcast, because I host it on my own personal brands channels. So s_factor_sam. You can find me on all the socials using that exact same handle, and even on gaming platforms using that handle. And then Sai here, he has a couple of socials and a YouTube now. So.
Yeah, I am on Twitter and Blue Sky as Sai Prime. Also YouTube, same name. You can see it on the screen, probably in the information or the title, wherever it's spelled.
I'll definitely have you linked in the description, and your name's going to be in the... Yeah, I'll have you tagged and linked.
And if you have any suggestions on stuff to check out, maybe make videos better, or like even theories, I'm trying to figure out what to make or what to do, and I enjoy video editing. The problem is I can't decide on what to actually do. It's man, back in the age of MatPat on the Theorist channels, I tell you what, like, I never thought what he did was easy, but I have a different
level of appreciation
for like, man, it must have been really hard to think of like a theory to do every
that's
week.
Why he had a team giving him suggestions and stuff.
I mean, that's also probably why I had to settle sometimes with theories that maybe could have been like debunked by this thing or that thing, but like it's compelling enough where it can be made interesting. Like, I got some
all the big bangers. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, that's, dude. it's time consuming and thought consuming. Like to make videos with any consistency, I don't have the time for it anymore.
I mean, when he started scaling up, he also had a team, obviously. But you know,
Yeah.
Anyway, that's beside the point. What I'm saying is,
Finding
if
your
you have
cups.
suggestions for me, I am open to it. Hit me up. You know,
Yeah, that works.
comment, tweet at me, message, Blue Sky, whatever. You know,
And if you have any feedback specifically regarding this show, use the tag, the hashtag CounterPickPod, altogether as one word. That works on Twitter/X and on Blue Sky. So, all right,
nice.
we're done here. Yeah, I've been actually pretty consistently using the tag in all the posts related to it to try and keep it more, connected. So, all right, that is it for us. We're out of here for now. We will see you next month in our next episode, last Saturday of the month. The reason we're doing it today for December is because we will not be able to do this on the next Saturday, which is the 28th. I may not even be able to stream that day, honestly, because it's I got some personal obligations with family on that day. So
Yeah.
but yeah, that's it for us. Have a great rest of your day. I need to come up with some sort of a closing slogan.
I mean, I've got my own outro thing, but I feel like it's not
Suitable for the podcast. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I kind of just added on whenever I can never decide on one thing. I mean, that's just me, but
Yeah, I guess I can just say, always try to at least open your mind to hearing some new perspectives.
open your mind.
That was a wah wah. We'll try. I'll workshop some stuff.
That was a wow. Okay. All right. We're done. We're done.
All right,
it.
everyone.
Cut it.
Have a good one. Later.